Welcome back to our channel. This is the second part to why other Australians don't take Aboriginal people serious. If you haven't already, go watch the first part and come back to tune in to the second part. Going to start the video off with a couple of questions. Would love to hear your opinions on these and the other ones posed. Number 1. Who is worse at the racial division? United States of America, Canada, South Africa, or Australia? Number 2. Has your mental health ever been affected by racism? Number 3. Does social media play a part in racial division? Number 4. Is racism affecting sports in Australia? Number 5. Is it insulting to respond to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter? If yes, why? Number 6. What do you think the government should do to get rid of all this systemic racism? Number 7. Is equality something that'll ever happen? Number 8. Will Australia ever have an Indigenous Australian Prime Minister? Number 9. What do you envision Australia would be like if there was an Aboriginal Prime Minister? Number 10. What do you envision Australia would be like in the next 2 years? We'd like an open discussion regarding few topics we're going to touch on briefly. All opinions are welcome. We're going to speak on few topics that gave a little chuckle, so figured we'd speak on them. Throughout the video, there'll be questions asked. Feel free to answer them. We personally think unity isn't something the government wants. They thrive best when we're all divided. They intentionally throw out racial innuendos out there, knowing that the constant blame of white people is still alive and at its peak. How the news describes certain cultures and traditions, etc., plays a big part. For example, Sudanese bloke, white Australian bloke, and indigenous Australian bloke commit the same crime. Headlines will say, Connor, age 24, stole a car, blah blah blah, relating to white Australian. Sudanese refugee boy, who's part of a gang, stole a car, blah blah blah. Mind you, even if he is, was that necessary to broadcast? No, it wasn't, but they're trying to paint a very disgusting image upon a community based off one individual's act. Young Indigenous man Josh, who has a family history of crime, has stolen a car, blah blah blah. It's how the image is painted that makes things worse, and as humans, we need to stop painting people with the same paintbrush. There's diamonds and gems amongst the dirt. We also received some DMs regarding part 1. Don't watch if the truth hurts. I, for one, will always wonder why didn't Aboriginal people didn't do what every other black race did when they fought for their rights and countries? Why haven't they gone the legal route? Why is Black Lives Matter their chant when that was for George Floyd, who's an African American man who got shot fighting not for freedom, just mistaken identity? Why do Aboriginal people use Black Lives Matter? Just start your own movement. Don't see any African Americans speaking on injustice in Australia. Stop clout chasing for a minute and actually focus on what's in front of you. What do Aboriginal people benefit from drawing the Palestinian flag on your posters besides media coverage? Even then, so don't see Palestinians speaking on Aboriginal people. Do they even know there's such thing in Australia? Sad truth is, nobody speaks about Aboriginal people outside of Australia because they don't care. Even the same celebrities you see wearing shirts with Indigenous flags as they tour Australia don't see them ever speak on Aboriginal issues ever. So why do Aboriginal people keep clout chasing African Americans, the most ignorant bunch out of the black race? Anyways, let's dive right into our findings. This year's NAIDOC week has raised some serious questions. While those who celebrate claim that it is only meant to celebrate the history and culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, this year's theme might be more divisive than before. Could an event like this be honouring and recognising Indigenous Australians, or just openly be unfair or racist? This year was different than ever before. I mean, more racist than ever before. Now, if you are confused about what NAIDOC Week is, how did it originate? Let me first explain that to you. The map of Australia we see today is very different from how indigenous peoples saw it. Before Europeans arrived, Australia was divided into many regions based on indigenous cultures and traditions. Each group had its own way of understanding and managing their land. When Europeans came in 1770, they created new political borders that didn't match these traditional areas. Since Europeans arrived, Australia has welcomed immigrants from Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. This has created a rich mix of cultures and traditions. Modern Australia is a blend of these diverse backgrounds, showing how much the country has changed from its original divisions to a place where many different cultures live together. Now, coming back to NAIDOC, what is it? NAIDOC stands for National Aboriginal and Islanders Day Observance Committee. It began in 1957 to set up a day to celebrate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The event was actually created to recognize their history, culture, and achievements. Over the years, it turned into NAIDOC Week, which happens every July. Now, if we talk about the logic behind that, is to honour Indigenous Australians and help everyone understand and respect their contributions and cultures. But here's a twist that might make you rethink how fair things are for everyone in Australia. NAIDOC Week is meant to celebrate and honour Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, but sometimes the event themes create an unfair situation for other communities. These concerns overshadow the contributions and needs of other cultural groups living in Australia. Is it due to putting a lot of emphasis on NAIDOC Week? Or is it the way the event is celebrated that makes other communities feel left out and neglected? Over the years, NAIDOC Week has had many different themes. If we first have a look at the NAIDOC theme in 2021, it was Heal Country. Now, how do you heal a country? Through medications, right? But for this campaign, it was majorly an act to support the Aboriginal communities and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The theme concentrated a lot on environmental and Indigenous issues, which left out other important concerns affecting all Australians and not just these specific communities. The theme actually made other cultural and ethnic groups feel overlooked or excluded. Now, a year later, on NAIDOC Week in 2022, the theme highlights Get Up, Stand Up, Show Up. This strong call to action made other communities feel that their issues are less important or that they are not being included in the national conversation. This also led to feelings of division or neglect among different cultural groups of Australia. In NAIDOC Week of 2023, the theme made it clear with the For Our Elders call. The concern was that the theme was more symbolic rather than leading to real actionable change. Some also felt that honouring elders, while important, did not translate into concrete support or improvements for broader community issues that also need attention. The question here is whether all these themes are justifiable. Aren't they unfair? Wait until you see what's in the most recent NAIDOC Week of 2024. So, in July 2024, NAIDOC came up with something more racist than ever before. The call was, Keep the fire burning, black, loud and proud. Making a grammatical mistake wouldn't stop making them look racist, by the way. Now, for just a second, think if it was white instead of black. Wouldn't it nearly cause a new world war? Of course, it would. So why is there nobody calling up against this? Just because they are Aboriginal? This year's theme has clearly highlighted division among the people. And on the basis of what? Skin colour? NAIDOC Week is a long-standing event that has been happening for years. So why is there no real discussion about justice and fairness for all? Why is this ongoing issue not being addressed more thoroughly? When we talk about the details behind NAIDOC Week 2024, you'll see things like support black-owned businesses or watch films by black filmmakers. If the focus were on white communities, it might be phrased as support white-owned businesses or watch the latest movies by white filmmakers. and Aboriginal people would pull the race card immediately. See how this highlights the indifferences that words and actions can sometimes appear to prioritize one group over others? Another pressing issue that we noticed was welcome to country. Now, welcome to country is a ceremony to welcome distinguished guests to Australia? Well, that's what we thought anyways. It's now been performed at school assemblies weekly in New South Wales and South Australia. Also was performed at the Australian Grand Final, concerts, conferences, and pretty much anything and everything at this point. It's an overkill. Should have been kept for actual distinguished guests such as presidents, prime ministers, and royalty from other countries. Mr. Brendan Caron stated boldly to the crowd, "Welcome to country isn't a ceremony dedicated to white people? Well, we don't see Aboriginals filling up the stadiums, do we? So if that's how he felt, then why perform the ceremony then?" Check Daily Mail or go to Sky News Australia if you think we're lying or exaggerating. Welcome country has ruined Australian sports and other activities. Quick question for the audience. When is it appropriate to perform welcome to country? Are other countries that aren't white allowed to join in? After all, Commonwealth deems us a multicultural society. Now, do all Indigenous Australians feel this way about other Australians? Absolutely not. Every individual is different, and we should all treat one another with respect and love. It's just sad to see that these so-called Indigenous events fuel racism and division amongst Australia. Racism is taught, and sadly, globally, the black race has victim mentality. When will the past be the past? What Indigenous Australians don't understand is Albanese is not your friend. The government thrives when there's division. It's easier for them to control the masses and shift blame on things easily. Also clouds and distract people from the misuse of Australian taxpayers' funds. Government thrives from misinformation as they frequently utilise ABC News and NITV to attack other Australians unprovoked with their constant race-baited articles. Just because one individual said something doesn't mean they speak for the whole demographic. How would Indigenous Australians feel if they were judged based off one person's act? Yes, we're aware it happens, which is also wrong for other Australians to stereotype. Albanese and other leaders often deem Australia a great multicultural society. Do you believe that's true, or just a delusion they're trying to sell? On to the next segment. Canberra is the capital of equality and fair treatment, right? Well, here's the government's Canberra Health Services website. Unsurprisingly, they have a page or 10 dedicated to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health. They being with the mandatory acknowledgement of the traditional custodians of the land, the Ngunnawal people. All our services are located on Ngunnawal country, with the Ngunnawal people having lived there for more than 20,000 years. They're committed to providing a culturally safe environment for Aboriginal people, and they acknowledge that hospitals aren't always places Aboriginal people go for healing. They have a CT scanner with Aboriginal art on it. Apparently, this is to help calm Aboriginal people when they get a scan. I'm not joking. Indigenous artwork eases medical imaging journey. Namaji Sky has been professionally wrapped around the CT scanner so that instead of being surrounded by a clinical white machine, our patients are instead immersed in the imagery of Namaji Sky in the Brindabellas. What if I want a clinical white machine? What if others don't like the artwork? What if others find it distracting? To be clear, we're not picking on Aboriginal people here. We're not even suggesting all Aboriginal people agree with this. But why are Canberra Health Services only trying to appease one subset of society? What if people of Chinese descent wanted some Chinese artwork on their CT scanner? Can the hospital provide that? What about people of Dutch heritage? Do they get a special CT scanner? If not, why not? What about British people? Africans, Asians, Middle Eastern? Why is it only one subset of Australian society entitled to special artwork on their medical devices? But it's not just artwork, it's menu items. on their food services page, of course they provide special meals to Aboriginal people. Menu for mob. They provide culturally appropriate meals. The menu includes traditional foods, but focuses largely on familiar, comforting dishes shared between many generations of Australian First Nations people. Kangaroo stew, barramundi in sweet chili sauce. As from quick assumption, sweet chili sauce originates from Thailand, but we were wrong. It originated in Zhongshan City in China. Either way, we can't see how this is a traditional Aboriginal meal. We're not saying Aboriginal people don't like it, but is it really a dish shared between many generations of Australian First Nations people? Savoury mince. Where do we start? Curried sausages with rice? Curry clearly originates from India, and rice is obviously Chinese. And sausages? They came from Mesopotamia. We don't mean to tease, but curried sausages with rice just doesn't make any anthropological sense. But the worst part, the menu is only available to people who identify as being Aboriginal. What about Chinese patients who like barramundi in sweet chili sauce? This is so discriminatory, but the woke government in China can't even see it or choose not to. If they really wanted to include these menu items for Aboriginal people, couldn't they have not just included them on the main menu for all to enjoy, instead of having a separate menu just for them? Our question is, are local indigenous people aware of this? How do they feel about this? Were they included in the meeting where it was decided we're going to offer traditional foods? And once again, why is only one subset accommodated? Never mind the white Australians, but what about the Asians that live here? What about the Africans? And why not throw in Muslims in the mix? But it gets worse. On their If You Could Design a Hospital page, dated July this year, they state new Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander lounge. There's pictures of it floating around on the internet. Presumably, only Aboriginal people are allowed to enter. Is this not reminiscent of South Africa 40 or 50 years ago, where access to places was determined by one's ethnicity? Supposedly, the ACT Labour Greens government are very progressive, but does this not seem regressive to you? Segregating hospital patients by ethnic background? Under care and birthing options, Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander. If you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander or pregnant with an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander child, you can access special services. Pregnant with an Aboriginal child? We get it. The father could be Aboriginal while the mother is not. But identifying the baby as Aboriginal before it's even born? Is there a test for that? Identity these days is a personal choice, which we learnt the hard way with the LGBTQI community in Australia. The issue there is, can one then say they're transracial? All the babies born in Australia are considered Australian. Instead of labelling babies Aboriginal before they're even born, wouldn't it make more sense to label them Australian, just like the rest of us? What's the point of all this division? This segregation going on in Canberra Health Services is not going to help Aboriginal. Doing it would say, yes, that's racism, or was it more, feelings were hurt, and the stated explanation was racism, when perhaps it wasn't? I don't know. I'm just asking. Here are some of the participants' quotes. The most racism I have experienced in my life has been at the ABC. That's interesting, because the ABC prides itself on being anti-racist. If the ABC is the most racist place in the world, God help the rest of Australia. We must all be a bunch of raving Ku Klux Klan members. More quotes. Because of the colour of my skin, I was seen as less than. Evidence, please. Simply feeling it or saying it does not make it true. There is an absolutely undeniable racist culture at the ABC. Again, proof please. Structural racism, microaggressions. Every Indigenous staff member experiences one form or another of racism on a daily basis. Okay, if this is honestly true, this is the worst place in the world to work for. When asked what they were doing in the building by a colleague, I'm pretty sure no one else gets asked on that floor. You need 3 security passes to get to that floor, and they were worried a black fella was there. Oh yes, we've never been stopped by security before. We can just walk into any building. Again, they use language like, I'm pretty sure. It's not evidence, it's just one's feelings and assumptions. Of course, money comes into it. The alleged pay gap. I am by far significantly underpaid. I see this as ABC's pattern of underpaying indigeneity, seeing it as a detractor rather than an asset. Again, how do you possibly prove this? Unless there's a policy written down somewhere saying, we pay Aboriginal people less than white people, then this is just speculation, is it not? Despite most anecdotal evidence presented in the report, of course, the ABC's head white man, David Anderson, apologized for the horrible racist culture at the ABC, stating, on behalf of everyone at the ABC, I am sorry for any and all racist behavior and past harms experienced by our Indigenous and cold employees, whether currently or formerly employed. We all need to do better for our colleagues by remaining vigilant against racism or discrimination of any kind in our workplace. Interestingly, star Indigenous presenter Tony Armstrong, who has since resigned from ABC News Breakfast, was called out by the ABC's own Media Watch program for moonlighting as an NRMA insurance voiceover man. Specifically, she said, there are strict rules around ABC staff doing external work, and the rules get tighter the more famous you are, with the ABC stipulating that any external work by a high-profile presenter is very high risk. It's a shame this moonlighting at the expense of the ABC's integrity is what we're talking about in his final week on the news breakfast couch. Look, maybe we're wrong, or biased, or maybe just racist by noticing the angle that Indigenous Australians are leading with. Maybe the ABC is a god-forsaken racist hellhole, but from the evidence we've seen, a lot of it is just hearsay and anecdotal at best. In no way or form are we saying people aren't being treated badly over at the ABC, or their feelings aren't being hurt, but perhaps it's got nothing to do with race? Now, upon writing this, we've deemed the ABC racist as hell. Just look at the so-called support of Kamala Harris solely based off her race. Look at the few snippets and topics they choose to discuss, then tell me I'm wrong. Indigenous Australians are in the news again. When are they not? It's been reported that the Indigenous population, that is, the population of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, has reached 1 million people, representing 3.8% of Australia's population. Is it a time to celebrate? Isn't it a bit funny of a thing to celebrate, don't you think? It doesn't seem like there's much other positive news about Indigenous Australians at the moment, but whose fault is that? According to a report by the ABS released a few months ago, they estimate and project Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, the Indigenous population actually reached 1 million people back in 2022. I guess it took them a couple of years to collate the data. Either way, the 1 million celebration is a bit overdue. Still believe there's more with those that wrongfully identify as Indigenous. But, as stated, it's not all good news. Reports on the New Look ABC show that First Nations women are the fastest growing group of people being sent to prison. Isn't it interesting race is always brought up? How does prison rate have to do with celebrating 1 million people? Isn't it always interesting how they always frame it that it's like they're being sent to prison unreasonably? Are Indigenous Australians the only nationality in prison? ABC News intentionally starts things with statements such as this, but calling them out is deemed racist? Perhaps they could have rephrased the heading to be more honest. First Nations women are committing more crime and therefore being sent to prison more often. And add more context to the heading by highlighting a few circumstances, for example, peer pressure, abuse, etc., etc. Even get the women themselves on the phones to explain why they committed these crimes. After all, the ABC is about Indigenous voices being heard. In the article, they state, on any given night, 4 out of 10 women behind bars are Indigenous women, despite making up only 2.5% of the adult female population. which is approximately 16 times what one would expect. But as stated, they frame it in a way where they describe many of these inmates as victims. Many women on the inside are wrongly locked away. And, of course, we can't forget about systemic issues which are forcing them to commit crime. A lot of the women are in here because of poverty and because of systemic oppression and unresolved intergenerational trauma, grief, and pain. Oh yes, because everyone who grew up in poverty are all in prison now. No, not really. Despite several governments committing to reduce the number of First Nations people being sent to prison, the numbers seem to be going the wrong way. I think that just proves the point. Whatever the government is doing regarding Indigenous affairs is simply not working. All these billions of dollars being thrown at these issues have simply not worked, and perhaps has even exacerbated the problem. I wish somebody would throw $4 billion my way to help me get a house, but no, I'm not the right ethnicity. Or by stating this, are we being racist? Do Africans and other people of colour have such incentives being thrown their way, or just Indigenous Australians? There's an article on the two-tiered justice system on The Guardian. Former national president of the Rebels motorcycle gang, Dean Martin, was arrested recently and is set to be deported to New Zealand. But Senator Lydia Thorpe says the government has made a huge mistake, claiming he can't be deported because he's Indigenous. Guess what, folks? He's not Aboriginal, but I guess because he's a bikie, it wasn't awfully too hard to get an elder to confirm him. The University of Divinity have decided to shut down its School of Indigenous Studies. The University of Divinity's Council has reviewed its 2024-26 budget projections and decided its School of Indigenous Studies is not financially sustainable in the current higher education environment. I wonder how many other universities are also considering this move. Clearly, whatever the government have done regarding Indigenous affairs is a complete flop. In my opinion, Indigenous affairs is at its lowest point in recent years. The government have done nothing to close the so-called gap, only widen it really. How do you non-Indigenous Australians feel about the bridging gap crap they've been attempting to do? Is the government going about it the right way, or just buying sympathy at this point? So here's a bit of good news. Minister for Indigenous Australians, Linda Burney, is calling it quits and is set to retire. January 26th is coming up. Australia Day, a time to celebrate everything Australian. Australia Day is traditionally a time for sporting events, citizenship ceremonies, barbecues and fireworks. It's a time to bring Australians together to be thankful for our way of life and hard-won freedoms. What could possibly be wrong with that? Well, in recent years, some Indigenous Australians and supporters have protested its celebration, labelling it Invasion Day, Survival Day, or Day of Mourning. This day is seen as a sadistic celebration of the invasion of their traditional lands. Some call for the date of Australia Day to be changed, while others call for the holiday to be abolished entirely. Let's hear your thoughts about this in the comment section below. Should the day be abolished altogether? Should the date be moved to the 27th so Indigenous Australians can mourn in peace? Or should those who want it left as it is hit the pavement and protest against on the same day? Although this is only a minority position, some big companies and organisations have jumped on board over the couple of years. In 2017, publicly funded National Australian Youth radio station Triple J announced that they would no longer play their annual music listener poll, The Hottest 100, on 26 January due to growing dialogue around Indigenous recognition and perspectives on 26 January. Last year, 2023, the Victorian government quietly axed its Australian Day parade and fireworks without any sort of formal announcement. Cricket Australia also stopped referring to Australia Day in any promotions for games held on January 26. Kmart announced they would no longer be selling any Australia Day merchandise to ensure it is inclusive and respectful to all. The Australia Open also shelved the holiday. And now, in 2024, the supermarkets have now jumped on the bandwagon. Australia's biggest retailer Woolworths announced they would no longer stock Australian Day merchandise. While Australian flags are sold within Big W all year round, we don't have any additional themed merchandise available to purchase in-store in our supermarkets or Big W ahead of Australia Day. There has been a gradual decline in demand for Australia Day merchandise from our stores over recent years. At the same time, there's been broader discussion about 26 January and what it means to different parts of the community. German-owned discount supermarket chain Aldi have also followed suit, announcing they will no longer be stocking Australia Day merchandise. Did they feel pressured? In 2014, they famously stocked a shirt that read, "Australia, established 1788, and was accused of being racist despite approval from the federal government. Serious question. Is it only Australia that attacks its traditional customs and values as much as we do? Why do supermarkets and other businesses feel the need to jump on the bandwagon and play political games? Even if they didn't support, not like they'd run out of business. Indigenous Australians need groceries too, you know? Another question. Have any of you guys watching ever been to another country that is so set on destroying itself with racial division? Do not mention South Africa or United States of America. They're just like us. In response to Woolworth's move, leader of the opposition, Peter Dutton, said, "I think people should boycott Woolworths. I would advise very strongly to take your business elsewhere. Until we get common sense out of a company like Woolworths, I don't think they should be supported by the public." In a media release, One Nation leader Pauline Hanson commented on the controversy, stating, "Big business in Australia appears to be completely out of touch with the rest of us. Today I was in a Bunnings store where an employee told me staff had been instructed to wear no items associated with celebrating Australia Day because it might offend someone." Coles is apparently the only major supermarket that hasn't yet joined the woke brigade, although give them some time, I'm sure they'll come around. A spokesperson said, "We are stocking a small range of Australian-themed summer entertaining merchandise throughout January, which is popular with our customers for sporting events such as cricket and tennis, as well as for the Australia Day weekend." It's interesting. These big companies, such as Woolworths, pretend to be virtuous, but yet they're happy to underpay their staff, participate in price gouging during a cost of living crisis, and generally treat farmers and suppliers with disdain. They claim to want to help Indigenous Australians, but for 5 years pushed to build a giant Woolworths-owned Dan Murphy's liquor store in the nation's most inebriated city of Darwin, with public health groups arguing the store would increase the rate of alcohol-related harm and put nearby Aboriginal communities at risk. Although Woolworths have since backed down from this plan, placing it on the back burner. It seems like these big companies just don't learn. Woolworths famously supported the Indigenous Voice to Parliament referendum, which the Australian people ended up voting against. So, for no reason at all, they decided to alienate more than half their customer base. Look, companies are free to do what they want, but so are customers. If companies choose to pick a side that doesn't align with yours, you're free to pick a different company. I think this is the best advice for them. Woolworths and the likes should stop taking sides in divisive social issues. Bluntly speaking, they should shut up and stick to selling groceries. Another topic we'd like to touch on is the Australian Book Industry Awards. Entirely unbiased and completely apolitical, so I've been told. Here's the winners of 2024. And the book of the year goes to Brian's Life by John Smith. Brian is your typical Aussie bloke. He grew up on a dairy farm in regional Queensland. He always voted for the National Party. He likes eating meat pies and drinking beer. He voted no in the 2023 Australian Indigenous Voice referendum, and he drives a Ford Ranger. But his girlfriend Kylie just dumped him, and the dairy industry has been struggling of late. So, earlier this year, Brian took a leap of faith and moved to the big smoke to find a job. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. His boss accused him of using language that is not considered politically correct. The government wants him to get rid of his Ranger because it doesn't meet the right emissions targets. His colleagues told him he has to change his diet to save the planet. What will Brian do? Brian's Life is the award-winning novel by acclaimed author and proud North Queenslander John Smith. That sounds pretty decent and accurate, right? Unfortunately, that was fiction and what could have and should have been. Now, this is the actual book of the year for 2024, and this is not a joke. Feel free to share your intake on this. The Voice to Parliament Handbook by Indigenous leader Thomas Mayo and Australian journalist Kerry O'Brien. It was created as a simple guide to the 2023 Voice to Parliament referendum to address misinformation throughout the campaign. Mr. Mayo said himself, "I thought a handbook, something simple that people could hold on to, pass around, and share with others to help them find the truth, would be important." Obviously, the only people who bought this book were people who were going to vote yes anyway, so it didn't really have the desired effect. On top of being the book of the year, it also won the Social Impact Book of the Year as well as General Non-Fiction Book of the Year. So it took up 3 categories. But in my mind, due to the overwhelming no vote at last year's referendum, I would suggest that this book should now be reclassified as a work of fiction. The General Fiction Book of the Year went to The Bookbinder of Jericho by Adelaide author Pip Williams. It tells the story of 2 young sisters during World War I who must bind books at the Oxford University Press. While all the men are off fighting, it's the job of the women to keep the nation running. One of the sisters has dreams of educating herself and using her intellect, not just her hands. In unrelated news, the commissioning editor or publisher of the year goes to these 6 individuals. Leave it up to Australia to cause more division. Not one male to be seen. They must still all be off at war. The Small Publishers Adult Book of the Year goes to Eden Glassy by Melissa Lukashenko. Miss Lukashenko tells a story about Brisbane before it was Brisbane in the mid-19th century when Aboriginal people still outnumbered white settlers. In her book, she tortures Queensland's colonial myths while reimagining an Australian future. They even have a Bookshop of the Year category. One bookshop I found interesting was Big W. For those of you who aren't Australian, Big W is a giant chain of discount department stores owned by Woolworths. How the hell did they get the nomination? Well, let us tell you now. They stocked a book called Welcome to Sex, a book written for children. Yes, children. And I tell you, it's pretty graphic. I've seen it. Definitely can't even show you half of what's in it because I'd probably get banned. But yet, it was out on the shelves for your children to peruse. It actually refers to people as penis owners and vagina owners, kind of like Aboriginals referring to themselves as traditional owners. Maybe it's just me overthinking things, but is this fair? We say no, but how about you? What do you think? Let me continue to give you more context. In July last year, Big W removed sex education book from shelves after staff members abused. And guess which book won an award this year? That's right, Book of the Year for older children ages 13 plus. Welcome to Sex by Melissa Kang and Yumi Stein. Co-author Yumi Steins said the book is for 10 to 15-year-olds, but she'd be happy with a mature 8-year-old having a flick through. Why can't children just be children, for crying out loud? Anyway, there are some of the books that won the prestigious Australian awards, but Big W winning a Bookshop of the Year award? Delulu is the Salulu. So, revisiting what I said at the start, the Australian Book Industry Awards are entirely unbiased and completely apolitical? Do you agree? Or did I really just put my foot in it? Anyways, in conclusion, before we close off the video, we at Faceless Scenery are not racist, nor do we play racial politics. We just simply commentate on topics suggested to us either in our comment section under a video or via Instagram. The viewers requested, we delivered. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the questions and over the subject matter.